If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this. When I was 17, I believe I saw a demon. Does anyone here truly believe they've seen a supernatural being? When I was 15, my friends and I were in a field behind one of their houses. It was about 1:30 a.m. We'd been out there for hours, when suddenly, my friend Gabby says, "What the duck is that?" We all turned to see this very large creature, with glowing red eyes, lying on the ground with Gabby's dog and cat. We all start screaming and get up to run away. I turn around at one point, to see where my friends are, and the creature starts standing up. It must have been 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders, and what appeared to be wings. I can't tell you what it was, but I can say, when I saw the movie Mothman Prophecies a few years later, I froze, realizing it was almost identical to the creature we saw. I'm pretty skeptical about all of this stuff. I have crazy dreams, intrusive thoughts, and sleep paralysis, where my mind is awake, but my body is still paralyzed, and I'm trying to get out of a bad dream. I don't know what it is about me, but I've just never taken any of this seriously, and, from a pretty early age, I was able to understand that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I used to turn my nose up at people who were super credulous, until I met my darling step-grandmother. She's a smart woman. She's atheist, no nonsense, and pretty awesome. But she genuinely believes she's been abducted by aliens. She doesn't talk about it with me, and I only know about this through my stepdad. She's been having abduction experiences since she was little. She believes they really happened, but she just chooses to ignore it. She'd be mortified if she knew that I knew. My step-grandfather and her kids are the only ones she's spoken to about it, and she doesn't have any paranormal interests, otherwise. I'm not a particularly credulous person, so I don't think she has actually been abducted. Then again, I don't think she's just making things up, either. I think she's had an experience that is so realistic, that it is real to her. Getting to know her, and getting to realize that she isn't a total loony, has made me rethink the eye rolling that I used to do paranormal experiences. While I think most of this stuff can just be explained by the misfirings of the remarkably creative and ducked-up brains we all possess, I don't think you're a bunch of loons. Just remember, the brain is a powerful instrument, and is totally capable of presenting incredibly realistic, but ultimately fake, images and sensations. My sister and I were in a bedroom in a B&B in Ireland. We chatted for a while, then turned out the lights and got ready to sleep. The radio on the bedside table came on, in between stations so that it was half static and half Gaelic, Irish. We couldn't understand. We tried turning it off, but the switch was already off. We stopped it by unplugging it. As soon as we'd done that, a knocking sound came from inside the cupboard. We opened the cupboard to find a door in the floor. It had a handle and hinges, just like a door in the wall, but in the floor. As soon as I touched the handle, the knocking stopped. The door was locked, so we never saw what was there. In my old 2-story house, there was a latch in the wall of my bedroom that led to a crawl space above the garage. It was ugly, so I put my nightstand in front of it. One night I woke with a start. I was laying in bed for a few seconds after a deep sleep, staring at the ceiling in my pitch-black room and waiting for my brain to stir itself so I could do something. Then came a furious pounding on the wall directly behind my bed frame. It could have been anything, but it was with the frequency of a person using their fists as vigorously as possible. It lasted steadily for hours, but actually probably 10 seconds in real time, before ceasing. On 2 separate occasions I have seen a figure standing in my bedroom. The first time I was 8 to 9, the second time was last year. Starting about 2 to 3 years ago, I began hearing 2 distinct voices in my house. One is a female voice, the other male. The weirdest part about it is that I think the female is a lot more benevolent/pranky than the male. Like, when I'm home alone, I'll hear, what I think is, my mother calling me from downstairs, only to go down and realize no one is there. Once I came home, and opening the door I heard the female voice say, "Oh, he's home." To which I replied, "What's for supper?" When I realized that it wasn't my mother, I yelled out, "It's not funny." And then heard laughter, not evil laughter, just haha we got him kinda laughter, coming from my bedroom. The male voice has never done anything particularly malevolent, but I have heard really loud screaming in various parts of my house. Once, when I was about 10 to 11, I got into a habit of covering my head with a blanket. As I was lying in bed, I heard a voice right near my head say, "Do what you want, we know you're still there." That wasn't a fun night. I've also heard the male voice singing what sounded like an Irish folk song. It all sounds a bit insane, but that's only because I'm giving about 10 years of stories in a couple paragraphs. These things don't happen every day, usually months apart when I've stopped thinking about them. At around 3 in the morning, I woke up in my bed. Next to me, looming over my bed, was a figure. It was completely black, opaque, and looked two-dimensional. It had an exaggeratedly large mouth with sharp teeth, and was raising a claw-like hand. No eyes or any other features. It didn't make a sound, but within about a second or two of me waking, it jumped into the wall and quickly scurried around, almost Spider-Man-like fashion, to the other side of the room, making clawing sounds on the walls, and then disappeared. I laid in bed for a few moments, and then sat up. The odd thing was, I didn't feel frightened. I knew it was a dream, but I also knew I was awake when it happened. I was able to fall asleep without much trouble after that. When I was about 8 or 9, my father took me out for a walk in the bush on the weekend. My mother and sister were overseas visiting family members. The forest was about 45 minutes of walking, and eventually you would end up at a graveyard. Being a curious kid, I was looking at the graveyard thinking how nice the flowers are and how nice the stones looked. People put stones on graveyard colored ones. One I remembered was green and white, so I picked it up, raced up to my dad and said, "Daddy, look." My dad gave me a serious look and said, "Where did you find this?" I said, "That gravestone over there." I pointed. My dad told me to put it back, and we never spoke anything of it and continued our way back to our car. On the way home, my dad got dinner and a toy car which you had to build by yourself. I spent about 2 hours that night building it and went to bed. Next morning I got up very early and continued building the car, and to put things in context, my room was on the second floor and I was facing towards the window for better lighting, I guess. Suddenly, halfway building, I looked up and there I saw it. A person, which I can't remember his face properly, was looking at me for a good 5 seconds, then he turned to his left and went up. Very shocked and confused, I went into my dad's room and snuck into his bed. He was still asleep. I told him later that day and he believed me, saying it was most likely because you touched that person's grave. I don't believe it was supernatural in retrospect, but when I experienced it, it freaked me the duck out. I was in Korea over the summer in middle school, living at my relatives' places. In Seoul, pretty much everyone lives in an apartment. One of my relatives lived in a particularly run-down complex. There was a general store right next to the apartment complex, and it was usually safe to go there even at night, so I went to go get some ice cream at around midnight. I walked back, and the bottom floor was quite dark. I went into the elevator, pressed the button for my floor, and waited a few seconds. Then the door opened on another floor before mine. There was this woman in a white dress with long, black hair just standing near the stairs, sort of shrouded. She didn't get in or move. She was very still and far away enough that I couldn't get a clear view of her face. Ducking shit bricks as I went up the elevator, crickety sounds and all. Most likely it was just some random woman with a white dress, but the whole situation was just a huge Asian horror movie setup. Once, when I was 8, I swear I saw something, non-human, standing in the corner of my room. It was around 10 p.m. and this lasted until about 1 a.m. I did the whole, close my eyes and it will go away routine, but, when I opened them it was still there, standing, watching. Another time, when I was 13, I saw a ghost of a girl right past me in the woods when I lived in North Carolina. I think of her as a ghost because when I turned back, she was gone. There was no large trees for her to hide behind, and I doubt she was fast enough to get out of eyesight. The one with the thing in the corner still kinda scares me to this day. Just typing it in the dark forced me to dash to my light switch and flick it up in a heartbeat. I had 2 occurrences in the winter of 2009. The first was one morning when I was getting ready for work. It was about 6 a.m. My apartment was dark and my front door was open because my GF was just outside smoking, waiting for me. I was doing something in the living room and I saw a figure move past me in my peripherals. I assumed it was my girlfriend. I shivered for no reason. The figure had moved towards the back of the apartment, so about 20 seconds later I called back and asked if she was ready to go. She poked her head from outside and said yes. I freaked the duck out and ran outside. She swore nothing went in the apartment. Fast forward about 2 weeks. I dismissed what had happened as grogginess and moved on. I didn't have a car at the time and my GF wasn't around that morning, so I was walking to work. It was about the same time as the last event, a dark winter morning. Once again in my peripherals I saw a figure moving, seemed to be keeping pace with me. I just got goosebumps typing this. Wow, it was to my left, a wide open field area with some trees. When I looked over, there was a shadowy figure mirroring my exact stance about 30 feet away. I didn't think, didn't scream, I just took off. Full sprint the last 3/4 of a mile to work. Haven't experienced anything like it since. Don't know how I feel about it to this day. When I was young I woke up one night to a figure standing in the doorway. It was backlit so I would only see its outline. It started walking towards me, and I figured it was my brother or dad. But as it got closer I knew it wasn't one of them, but I didn't know who it was. I know I called out to it to ask it who it was, but I don't know if it responded. When it got to the foot of my bed, it began leaning over me and I saw its face, almost like one of those cloth dummy heads they sometimes put on mannequins in store. It had definite distinguishing features, but at the same time was completely blank, almost like the face was transforming constantly, always something, but never whole. I kicked my foot into it a few times. The first kick it felt solid, but by the second or third it began to dissolve and fade away. I turned the light on and sat for a few minutes and never told a soul. The second time I encountered it, I awoke feeling almost as if I had been dropped on the bed. I was completely sideways on the bed with my feet hanging off the side and I was on top of the covers. I sat up just to glimpse the figure walking out the door as he looked over his shoulder at me. I can't to this day shake the feeling that he had taken me from my bed many times, and I caught him trying to take me the first time, and the second time I awoke to him returning me. Creepy shit, it still makes me shake with fear even now as a grown man. I have never told anyone about this. I was camping with some friends in Western MD a few years ago. We see a very bright light go overhead and land on the top of this hill. We were in the forest, so it was hard to tell what the light was. After sitting there for about 20 minutes, my curiosity gets the best of me and I decide to make my way up the hill to check it out. My friends don't want to come, so I go up alone. As I get up closer to the light, I start feeling kind of strange, almost frozen like a deer in headlights. I stand there and I notice quiet little footsteps coming nearer. They are creeping, not walking clumsily like a human would through the woods. I can tell there are at least 2 of them, maybe 3. The last thing I see is the gray skin and big black eyes. I suffer a lapse in consciousness. No time was lost, but it's like I was plucked from local space-time and reinserted. Some other very unpleasant things happened after that which almost led me to suicide. I can honestly say it was the worst thing that has ever happened to me, and a day doesn't go by where I don't think about that night. A buddy of mine who is wildly non-religious and does not believe in ghosts told me about something that happened to him once. He says there has to be a logical explanation for it, but he has never been able to find one. He used to live on a farm out in Ohio, or something, that had a typical wraparound porch with rocking chairs etc. Every day he would get dropped off from school and walk down the long driveway to his house, walk up the stairs to the porch, and go inside. He told me that one day he was doing this, walked up the stairs, and on his left on ground level a woman in 1800s attire was walking on the side of his house. She was on ground level, he was on the porch, so he could only see part of her. He focused on her and she turned and looked at him and then appeared to be floating when she came around the house and went into the woods. Creepy shit if you ask me. He still says it's not a ghost as he doesn't believe in them, but I don't know what else it would have been. One skeptical thing I have always held on to is, why are all ghosts from the 1800s? Why are there no caveman ghosts? Do they just not care? My pops always said he saw something like a demon once. We're from New Orleans and once of his cousins ran into him on the street one day, and while catching up he invited his cousin and girlfriend over for dinner. Mom and Pops are vetting out the girlfriend and she mentions she's a witch, not a Wiccan, not a shaman, but I cast spells on people to get what I want. Mom's is creeped out but Pops just shrugs at it. His cousin mentions his girlfriend is a witch, and one Saturday he woke up with her straddling his stomach, eyes rolled back, chanting over him. She does not look happy at this getting a mention. Hours pass, they leave, everyone goes to sleep and Dad has weird dreams. He's never said what, just weird, and he opens his eyes in the middle of the night and he describes it as like in Scooby-Doo or something, where they look into the forest and all they see are the eyes of things looking at them. He saw pairs of eyes from all over his room, belonging to things perched on furniture. He runs from the room, into the living room, hits a few lights. He's not religious, not Christian, but starts praying to Jesus. He's winging it, he's just saying Jesus help me over and over, and he sees it. The way the house was shaped, the dining area wasn't lit from the living room but they were connected. He sees what he's described as an 8-foot-tall warthog that walked on its hind legs, has red irises and was wearing some kind of hat or helmet, lumber from the dining room, to the front entry area. It got to where the front door is and didn't go through there, but through a section of wall on the front face of the house and just faded from sight. He wept heavily for a while, cleaned up in the bathroom and just drank coffee in the living room the rest of the night until he had to go to work. Not really supernatural/alien, but when I was 8 I was at my grandma's house with my sister and my cousin. My sister was 10 and my cousin was 16. My grandma lives in the country on an almond farm and told my cousin that she could practice driving her truck around if she agreed to wash it. As my cousin and my sister were washing the truck, I decided to leave and play my game where I spy on them like a detective and write notes in my notebook. I hide behind a chicken coop probably about 300 feet away, peeking around the corner to spy on them. Then I look straight ahead and I see it. I see Bigfoot. No joke. And Bigfoot is doing exactly what I am doing. He's watching my cousin and my sister. He's standing behind a pile of firewood, putting his hands on top the pile to lean over, and he's watching them. I'm scared, so I back up slowly towards the end of the chicken coop until I'm around the corner and no longer in plain sight, and then race towards the front of the house. I run up to my cousin and tell her what I just saw, and she says it was probably a coyote. She wouldn't believe me. I ran inside. I know what I saw, and I wasn't going to be outside with that thing. I drew my cousin a picture of what I saw as well, and she continued to tell me that it was probably a coyote. No, it was not. No one ever believes my story. But I still believe in Bigfoot to this day. Logically, I think to myself now, what the hell would Bigfoot be doing on my grandma's almond farm in the valley in California? But he was there, damn it. When my little brother was around 6 years old, we lived in a beach house in Daytona. He had the room directly across from the master bedroom. My room was on the other side of the house. I remember waking up to my mom screaming on the top of her lungs one night. I ran into the living room and was looking into the hallway where she was pounding on an invisible door. The actual door was wide open to my brother's room. My brother was a couple inches off the bed on his back. There were roaches and ants swarming all the walls, visible from where I was standing in complete morbid shock, in the living room. My dad, ex-military/cop, started throwing bar stools and punches into the open doorway trying to get entrance. This went on for a good 45 minutes to an hour. My mother had called my grandma, out of pure fear, and as soon as my grandmother tried to enter the room, I shit you not, all the insects crawled towards the bed and disappeared underneath it. She walked into the room, with no problem. My brother was laying face down on the floor at this point, screaming. She picked him up and walked into our living room. Our family has never talked about this since it happened. It's been over 10 years. I have nightmares, at least once a month, regarding this situation. My family own a large property that dates back to 1820-ish, although a particular staircase may be older. The house has 2 staircases. At first, though it was just me, even typing this gives me shivers, but I felt cold, unhappy, dark, odd thoughts would cross my mind when using this staircase. So I stopped. Over 3 years I've discovered my brother, sister, cousins and wife have all experienced odd feelings going up and down this staircase, and as a result almost nobody in my family uses it. Young kids in particular pretty much start screaming the second they go near it. I'm a hugely rational person and I don't believe in spirits, ghosts or God, but I do believe houses can feel/change depending on their past. Something happened on that staircase. When I was 26 I moved in with a girl that had a garden apartment. The apartment was a 1-bedroom above another 1-bedroom where 4 apartments would share an entrance, so pretty much everyone living there knew each other pretty well. In the apartment below where we lived was a very nice hippie type that drove a taxi in the evenings for income. He was older but for sure was into smoking pot. My girlfriend at the time had a very nice black cat. One night as we are sleeping I hear a growl in my ear. I was sure it was the cat, but when I opened my eyes I saw a ghostly face. Where the eyes and mouth should have been there was just black. Very frightening. At the same time the cat was running around the house jumping from wall to wall. Well, I was completely freaked out and did not sleep for the rest of the night. This is not the end of the story. 2 weeks later at 4:30 a.m., the police come knocking at our door. They have had to knock in the door of our downstairs neighbor, the hippie taxi driver. He died in the bath and had been dead for 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure there is a correlation between what I experienced and when he passed. Scares the crap out of me to think it was him or something that came to get him that woke me up and scared the cat. To begin, I am an atheist, a skeptic, and I think that all of these stories have a logical reason behind them. However, when I was 9 or 10 I had a Halloween b-day party and my friends and I were playing with a Ouija board, one of those Parker Brothers games bought from Target. The entire time we played with it, asking it questions and everything, I was subtly moving the marker to answer the questions, trying to freak my friends out. They must have assumed that I was moving it because we were just laughing and nobody took it seriously. When we were finished, we all stood up and started walking out of the room. One of us turned back to face the board and said goodbye to it, giggling like little kids do, and the marker moved completely on its own, at least 6 inches, to cover the word goodbye on the board. We all saw it, including my mom and her fiancé who were in the room with us. None of us even screamed. We just sat there in stunned silence. After a few seconds my mom went over and kicked over the marker with her toe and nothing else happened. My mom and her fiancé were genuinely concerned and looked the board over. Still today, this is the only thing I've experienced that I can't imagine how to explain logically. I thought maybe my mom or her fiancé had a string, but it moved in the opposite direction from where they were standing. There was no fan on in the room, and none of us felt any sort of gust. The marker is made of plastic and cannot be affected by magnets. Hell, we didn't even live in an area subject to earthquakes or tectonic movement, so that has to be ruled out, too. My mom considered moving out of the house, but we never did and nothing like that ever happened again. We all still talk about it today, with the two friends I'm still in contact with, anyway, and we all agree that it must have been some supernatural event that we can't explain. Any ideas? The family used to own a large brownstone, but eventually people moved out/died, so eventually it was just my grandfather living on the bottom floor. I was told not to go upstairs on a few occasions, mainly because I was still a kid and could get hurt on the stairs or just messing around unsupervised. So of course I went up there. Routinely. One day I get to the second floor. In front of me is an older woman in the kitchen, slightly transparent, her back to me. At this point I am scared stiff. I must have made some noise, because she turned around and looked at me, but theirs was something definitely not human about her eyes, and she was not happy with me. I flew down the stairs in an incoherent panic. A little over a year later, my parents are showing me some old pictures and I started freaking out. It was my great aunt, who had lived on the second floor before dying 5 years before I saw her. If someone were to tell me this story, I would say they're making it up. But I can't lie to myself. And while my family never saw her, they remember both events better than I do because they were adults. So I was visiting my now ex-girlfriend and her extremely conservative parents forced us to sleep in different buildings, so I had to sleep in their guest cottage-like thing. It was more of a washing cabinet that had been modified to be more comfy. Anyways, as I was about to go to sleep I got this pressing feeling that something wanted me out of there. Usually I just shake away these feelings by blanking my mind, but it didn't work this time. Eventually though, I fell asleep. Next night, the same thing. And then I started hearing footsteps and scrapes, which I explained away as simply being animals or my imagination. This was in the middle of the woods after all. And this goes on for every night that I sleep in that cabin until her parents finally allows us to sleep in the same freaking room, so we both sleep in the cabin. And as we were lying there we hear someone laughing outside. I just ignored it because I'm used to strange things happening and always thinks it's just my imagination, but then she asks what was that? And that's when I realized I didn't imagine it. So we noped the duck out of that place, and that was the last time I ever slept in that cabin. When I was 13 I woke up in the middle of the night and went to the hallway to go get a drink of water. Note, we keep water in some cups in the hallway just so that way we don't have to go downstairs to get some. So as I'm done and heading back to my room I hear these really loud whispers coming from downstairs. I get really scared and just stand there. Then I start to hear slow footsteps coming up the stairs, but I didn't see anything and just run back to my room. Then the next year on Christmas Day around 7 a.m. I wake up and go to the hallway. As I'm about to take my first step downstairs I see a pale white man at the bottom with a top hat, a beard and fog surrounding him. Also I was able to see through him for some reason. We stare at each other for a while until I run back into my room scared to death and stayed in my room until my parents woke up. When I was 17 I had an experience with something supernatural. I don't know if I should call it a ghost, a demon, or a spirit, but it was terrifying. I'm not a religious person, but this made me know for a fact that there is something else in this world. Whatever it is, I think it is one of the major reasons why religions are what they are. They are people trying to create an origin for the supernatural things they have experienced. Anyway, on to the story. I was around 17 years old and lived with my parents. I was staying home alone. I can't recall where 2 of my 3 brothers were, but they were not home. As for older brother, he was away in the Navy. My parents were in Monterey for the weekend. It was just and Max, my dog. I was watching TV. It wasn't anything scary because I hate scary shows/movies. While I get tired and decide to head off to bed, Max tags along. I lay down and fall asleep on my stomach, or maybe I roll over on my stomach in my sleep. All I know is when I woke up I was on my stomach sleeping with my head on one arm. I remember the dream I was having. It was about my first crush from grade school, Levy. Then, I wake up to the sound of my dog whining, an all about eerie feeling, and a soft grip on my shoulder. I turn my head and look over my shoulder and I see it. It was a girl. She was on my back, yet I couldn't feel her there, only her grip on my shoulder. She had an overall dull green hue to her. If you have seen LOTR, Two Towers, it was kind of like the color of the ghosts in the dead marshes. Now, my reaction was almost instant. I turned my body and threw my right arm out across my body as I turned, like you would do if you were swatting someone off your back. The weirdest part was I could feel my skin contact with her, and it chilled me to the bone. I was utterly terrified, and so was my dog. That was how I knew I wasn't dreaming anymore. My dog was scared. Within seconds of me turning and seeing her, I was out of my bed and running to my car. Thank God my keys were on the wall unit in the living room. Max wisely followed, knowing I was scared, and I'm sure he was not wanting to be in that room anymore as well. I sat in my car for a while and Max calmed down with me. I then called my best friend and asked if I could stay the night at his house. I was too scared to go back into mine. Max didn't have a problem going back in, so I let him back in the side gate, grabbed clothes from our laundry room and drove to my friend's house. I'm now 21 and moved out, but to this day I have never stayed alone in that house again. Few years ago, I went to a winter camp with my school class. My friends and I shared a room, so we were 6 girls in a room. I was lying on top of the bunk bed but wanted to go down to my friend to chat before sleeping. When I crawled down, I thought that one of the others wanted to reach for my neck to scare/tickle me. It was so dark, so I only saw a strange creature, reaching for my neck. I thought it must have been one of my friends and told this person/creature to stop it. It's not funny, I saw you, etc. But this creature came closer and closer, so I went backwards till I was standing at the wall, not able to move any further. So I started to squeak and became more aggressive in my tone, telling this thing to stop it as it's really not funny anymore. One of my friends turned on the light to see what's going on. There I was, standing at the wall, trying to hide behind the curtains, almost crying. All my friends were lying in their bed, staring at me. Nobody wanted to scare me. The next day, one of my friends went to toilet during the night. When she came back to our room, she started yelling like a maniac. So we turned on the light and asked her what's wrong. She said that there was somebody standing on our balcony, staring at us. But of course there was nobody when we looked outside. I'm in my mid-20s now, but I remember all this as if it was yesterday. I remember this thing reaching for my neck vividly. I hardly tell anybody as they think I'm making it up. But all 6 of us, who were in this room, knew that there was something very odd. When I was about 5 or 6, I used to see this man and a cat every night or so in my bedroom, and I would talk to the man while the cat walked around, meowed and hissed. I told my parents about it and they just shook it off as an imaginary friend. But even to this day I distinctly remember what they looked like, how I felt, and even the conversations I had with him. It could easily have just been a constant dream as I talked to him roughly every other night. Or it very well could have been imaginary. I'm not sure how vivid a child can make things. I just remember having conversations where at times I didn't understand the questions he was asking, and I find that part strange. Because if it were just my imagination, I should be able to know what I, myself, was talking about. I really do believe I've seen something that I can only describe as paranormal or a demon. This was back in about 2004, I was driving back from my ex's house around midnight. She lived about 7 kilometers out of town on a farm, so it was a quick commute. There's a major intersection about 3 kilometers out of town, and as I approached the intersection and was slowly making my way towards town, my lights caught something tall and very out of place. So I stop the car and stare and try to make sense of what it is. At first glance I figure it's one of the horses that live on the property, but then I realize that it's taller and standing upright, and it ducking his wings. Not like bird or angel wings, but they almost look like a bat's wings. It's bipedal and looks like a human with bat wings. I have never driven off so fast, and I did not sleep for the next few nights just out of fear. When I was around 10 I was a Boy Scout, and we were often to these trips out in wilderness. One weekend we went to a hut out in a very dense forest. It was a really nice area, very cozy with lots of birds twerping in the trees. Simultaneously it was a very hot period, so the Boy Scout leader told us we could sleep outside the bivouacs, and underneath the trees. So I did. The next morning I woke up early, like 5 a.m. It was starting to get bright. I woke up because I could hear this extremely beautiful voice singing through the trees in an opera-like language I did not know. It sounded sort of like Enya. This was years before LOTR, mind you. I remember I stood up to see what was going on but couldn't see anyone and couldn't hear where it was coming from either. The song faded away before I could investigate, and I couldn't walk out of the sleeping area without waking anyone up. So I lay down to sleep again. The next morning I asked if anyone else had heard, but no. Everyone had slept soundly. And that's that. I've experienced other unnatural things but never anything evil or scary. And this is even though I enjoy walking dark abandoned areas alone. Maybe I'm the demon in some of your stories. I was walking home one day during the summer while I was in 10th grade from my first job as a grocery boy. It was around 10 at night, I was on my street already and almost home. It was garbage day the next morning, so everyone had their bins out. As I am walking I hear noises from this garbage pile, so I looked closer. It was really dark, so from around 10 feet away all I saw was this flat-headed thingy, to which I thought was a garbage bin. As I walked closer, that thing started jumping, like hopping. I was so ducking freaked out, but I froze. That thing hopped around in a circle around me. When I gained feelings in my legs I ducking ran home. For the rest of the night I pondered as to WTF it was. My logical side kept trying to convince myself it was just a rabbit or raccoon, but I was never convinced. That thing was way too big to be either. It was up to my hip, and had a really flat head, and the mother ducker hopped around me like it wasn't afraid. I have seen rabbits and raccoons, they ducking run at the sight of humans. So yeah, to this ducking day I don't know what the duck it is, I would really like to find out. Okay, so this one didn't happen to me, but it happened to my brothers on the same night. My oldest brother was away at college and he said one night he awoke to see a dark spiral emanating from his ceiling. He remembers not being able to move and saw the spiral convex and move into him. He then told me he convulsed and felt as if he was fighting something, but eventually was able to regain control. He got really freaked out and called one of his lady friends to spend the rest of the night with him. The next morning he called my brother, they are closer in age and are closer, and told him what happened. It appears that same night my other brother had a similar experience, except all he saw was the dark spiral above him, but that it did not come down into him. He basically told me, "Look bro, I don't know what happened, I'm just saying watch out." Fast forward a few years and I moved back home due to financial situations. I am sleeping on the downstairs couch whilst my parents and two brothers are asleep upstairs. This particular night I had no problem going to sleep, but I awake abruptly in the middle of the night to what I can only describe as if someone was whispering into my ear, but I couldn't make out what it was. We had a fish tank the living room at the time, so my mind tried to explain it away as white noise. I really started to freak out when I realized I couldn't move. I tried to lay upright but could not move, and when I tried to make a sound I could feel my mouth barely move, but only small gasps would come out. The whispering intensified during this time, but I just couldn't make out what language or words I was hearing. It just was all very confusing and terrifying. I was trying with all my might to just sit upright and breath, but I couldn't. My brother, whose room was closest to me, opened his door to go to the bathroom, and instantly I was in full grasp of all my senses. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. Whatever it was over, but my heart was still racing. After my brother went back into his room, I stood upright on the couch and just took a few long deep breaths and looked around the living room before trying to go back to sleep. I have not told my brothers about this event, and nothing like this has happened since. I try to look at things logically and have chalked this up as an episode of sleep paralysis, but this is what I experienced and I thought I would share. When I was young, maybe about 8 or so, my brother, 5, and I snuck into my parents' closet after dinner to scope out Christmas presents. My mom were a few yards away in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. My dad was in the same room on the phone. I closed the door behind us and locked it out of habit. The closet was also a half bathroom. So anyway, we were in there not very long when someone started pounding on the door like mad. I was frozen in place. It was so scary and violent. I thought we were busted. After a few seconds I hear my dad saying, "WTF are you kids doing?" and trying to open the door. I unlock it and open it, and he asks what we think we're doing banging on the door like that. I say we weren't and try to get him to confess to doing it. I even buffalo my way onto the phone to ask his friend if he heard anything. This proved fruitless, however. My dad has mentioned to me before how uneasy he felt when we first moved into that house. He would always say the Lord's Prayer and whatnot. I remember always seeing shadow figures as a kid, but I don't claim that wasn't the product of an overactive imagination. Although I keep a logical mind about absolutely everything, there was this one time that I just can't explain. I keep trying to find reasons for it and none work. It happened when I was 8, I was homesick, so it was me and my mom. My mom was outside gardening, I was inside sitting on the couch. From my view I can see the TV, which was off, and the reflection of the front window in the TV. So pretty much I'm sitting down reading and I see a reflection in the TV. It was my neighbor standing outside, but she looked different. Her hair was short, she looked sick. Her eyes were dead. And she was just standing there, not moving. Usually she was a nice old lady, had long silver hair and was always gardening, so I don't know what it was in the reflection. I stared at this unchanging reflection in the TV screen for about a minute. And it didn't move. Then, with an incredibly fast turn, I turned to face the outside window. But no one was there. No one at all. I turned back to the TV and the reflection was gone. Later, when my mom came in to check on me, I told her about it. She said that she hadn't seen the neighbor come over. The next day my neighbor paid us a visit to inform my mother she had been diagnosed with cancer. She looked fine then, but quickly deteriorated. She died a couple months later. Strange thing is, the last time I saw her she looked exactly how she did in the reflection months before. I prefer to think that she was actually standing in window for some reason, but the reflection just skewed her image and made her look like that. But I still can't figure out how she would have disappeared so quickly. I suppose it's just one of those kid memories. When I was 10 I had an awful waking nightmare. I had recently moved house, which is said to cause bad dreams. In the nightmare I was in a big castle-like hall, very dimly lit, with opposing staircases leading up to wooden doors. The doors were locked, but I was walking continuously up and down the stairs trying to open them. Another figure appeared in my dream without me really noticing, if you get me. A stooped monk in a dark brown robe with a hood so his face was concealed. We were both walking up and down these stairs, passing each other countless times in the darkness. Then as I was passing him once more on the stone staircase, he attacked me, pulling me to the floor and strangling me. His hood fell back, and that's when I woke up suddenly, but I couldn't move. And in my bedroom, sitting on my chest with his hands around my throat, was this monk. His face was rat-like and yellow with a pointed stubbly jaw, and his teeth were clenched in the effort of strangling me. The worst part was when I finally managed to move, I automatically pushed at the hallucination's face, and it felt like I felt the stubble on his chin before he disappeared. I then ran into my parents' room crying like a little baby. Definitely the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. It wasn't the first hallucination I had had, and interestingly is similar to other accounts, particularly the strangulation element. I've never told any of my friends this, for fear that I may be ridiculed, but here it is. When I was in 4th or 5th grade, my friends and I found out about the Bloody Mary legend. Thinking it was all fun and games, we tried it. That Saturday we all went out to one of the group's house. There were about 5 of us that showed up. We each got a mirror, all in different parts of the house. I, being the unlucky son of a witch that I am, got the basement. So, we all go about the ritual, Bloody Mary 3 times, yada yada yada. We all meet up about 10 minutes later, all but me, laughing about how stupid the legend was, how stupid we were. Everyone's asking me what I thought about it, considering I came back first. I look up startled, and say that I also thought it was stupid. Eventually we all just watched scary movies, though I asked for the mirror in the family room to be taken down, not giving a reason why. The reason was, yes, I did see something, it was me, but not me. It was me with bloodshot eyes, and for some reason that to this day stumps me, a Glasgow smile. I had never felt such fear in my life up to this point. The thing, who I have taken to calling Jack, because he reminded me of the smile of a jack-in-a-box, just stared, eventually moving its hideous mouth to say one word, hello. I ran faster than the wind, this leading up to the meeting. But unfortunately I have seen Jack more over the next 6 or 7 years, now I just look at him as a negative me. I see him from time to time, he talks to me, I talk to him. Thankfully he hasn't tried to steal my soul. Yet. I saw a live exorcism. I was skeptical as hell, and thought, okay, this is obviously some sort of psychological thing. It was my friend's little sister, and basically, she had changed a lot in the previous weeks. Like drastically. My friend told me everything that was going on, and we went to his house. His family and I are generally quite close, so they were cool with some of the questions I asked. Her behavior had apparently become scarily aggressive and rebellious. She had started drinking, which was a huge deal for their culture, and apparently was spending late night with boys. Another huge deal. She was 16 at the time. I knew that all she really needed was some therapy, but they were convinced she was possessed. I was young and terrified of my friend's parents, so I was too scared to object. Anyway, a bearded man walks in and speaks to them in their language. I'm simply rolling my eyes, unable to believe this is actually happening in the 21st century. He asked a few questions and then asked where she was. The parents replied the bedroom. Her parents walked and stood outside her door, and her father knocked. I was peeking at the staircase. She had headphones in so she didn't hear. He banged on her door a little more, and then she started to bang the door in the same rhythm on the other side. Her dad stopped. She opened the door, looked at them, giggled, then calmed down and walked to the living room. We're standing there, me, the bearded man, my friend, her brother, her other brother, and 2 of her cousins. The bearded man said something and her father basically grabbed her from behind. She started to scream. Like really scream, but everyone in her family just told her to calm down, that it's okay. Her father, while restraining her, brought her towards the bearded man, where she is still screaming and her arms are kind of flailing about. The father pins her down, and she really started to lose it. I'm absolutely scared here, I'm almost about to intervene, but I'm again, scared shitless and curious at the same time. The bearded man started singing some prayers and the girl began to scream as if it hurt her. This goes on for a while until I honestly couldn't take it anymore. This girl was sick and she needed help, not ramblings of yet another crazy person being sang down her ears. I looked to my friend and tell him to stop this, but he had the calmest expression in the world on his face. Here, his sister is being abused in front of his very eyes and he's just so chilled that I honestly felt like I didn't even know him. I go to the mother, who looked really emotional, but even she insisted that I absolutely should not interfere. I was still going to. But then, something insane happened and it still kinda scares me to this day. The possessed girl speaks. But not in a language she knew. She speaks a language that she knows how to read but doesn't understand a word of. The same language the bearded man was singing in. And she spoke it fluently. They have a conversation. The bearded man and the possessed girl. The whole family, even the father who still has her pinned but far more gently now, are left clueless as to what's going on. I go to my friend and ask him what they're saying, but he didn't know. I asked why not? He told me it wasn't his language, it was Arabic. He didn't know Arabic and neither did anyone in his family. Especially, his younger sister who could barely even read it. They were obligated by their religion to be able to read Arabic. The exorcist and the demon speak for a while until again he started to sing and she began to scream. I'm frozen to the spot now, I have no idea what the duck is going on and no idea what to do. He stopped singing and started whispering gently in her ear. She stopped screaming. He gets her to repeat a few prayers and she seemed normal again. He asked her father to let her hands go and she sat up. Her mother immediately goes in to hug her and her father and everyone seemed relieved. I am honestly shocked and just mind ducked. I'm standing there watching a girl who was apparently recently possessed surrounded by her loving family. After that, she was fine. She wasn't drinking, she wasn't dating. I spoke to her far more often and she seemed normal. She actually claims to not remember most of the exorcism. I quizzed her about it, but nothing. Just the end when he started whispering in her ear. Still think about to this day. Possessed by a demon? Or some crazy mental disorder which has you speaking a language fluently, a language you don't even understand?